guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. If you can hear any background noise, there's a little bit of a storm going on outside right now, so that would just be what the background noise is. If you can hear anything, I'm not really sure if you can. I'm hoping that you can't, but if you can, that is why. Also, I have a little bit of the sniffles as I am getting over a cold, so just bear with me with that. But with that all being said, let's get right into today's video. Today we are going to be discussing the topic known as phrogging. And the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because I've recently gotten really into this topic. I just find it so interesting. And I didn't know that this topic had a name, but this specific thing, phrogging, is something straight out of nightmares. For those of you who don't know what phrogging is, because I didn't until looking into it for today's video, this is when a person is living in your home while you're still living in your home without your knowledge. Is that not the most terrifying thing you've ever heard in your entire life? I've heard several of these cases, but lately it's just something that really piqued my interest and I really got into. And there was a specific topic or a specific case story that really interested me that I do want to focus on today. However, it happened pretty recently and there isn't enough information for me to make a full video on it. So I'm going to be sharing 3 cases of phrogging. The first case we are going to be talking about takes place around the Campbell family. This family includes Brittany, her husband James, and their 2 young sons. The family of 4 took a vacation from their home in Honolulu, Hawaii, and they returned home on September 20th, 2019. When the family pulled up to the house, they noticed that there was a bike kind of like leaning against the family home, and this did strike them as a little bit odd, but they didn't think anything of it because they just assumed that maybe, a neighbor had put it there or somebody had left it on the house thinking that it belonged to one of the family members when it hadn't. The family began to get out of the car and James walks up to the house to unlock the door and open it so that they can bring in their luggage and the kids easily. However, when he went to open the front door to his family home, there was a man standing on the other side of the door holding it closed. And that is when worry and panic really set in for the family. And this man super calmly said to James, "This is not your house." Can you even imagine? The family acted very quickly and 911 was called and the police were on the way, and James pulled this man outside of the home onto the front lawn, noticing that this man was dressed head to toe in all of James's clothes. When police arrived, this man was identified as 23-year-old Ezekiel Zayas. He was arrested and taken away, and I'm sure at this point the family thought that their nightmare was over. However, when they entered the family home, their nightmare was actually just beginning. They walked into the home to find it in a really bad state. There was pots and pans and just stuff everywhere. I even saw in one article that there were human bodily fluids all over the house. Now, what bodily fluids those are wasn't specified, so I have no idea, but any bodily fluid that would be all over the house is just disgusting, especially when it came from somebody that you don't know and who ultimately broke into your house. It's disgusting. While tidying the house, one of the adults came across an old laptop that they had that had been taken out, and they found on this laptop that Ezekiel had been keeping very morbid diaries, not only about the family, but what he wanted to do to them in both video and written form. There were also specific lists of details for all 4 family members, showing to Brittany and James that this man, Ezekiel, had been living in the family home with them without their knowledge for an extended period of time. All the notes that were found on the laptop were titled "The Omnivore Trials, a Revelation for Rat-like People." There were also a typed manifesto about horrible plans on what to do with all 4 members of the Campbell family. These notes included, but were not limited to, talking about giving members of the family sexual reconstruction as well as hand transplants. Like I mentioned, he had recorded some of these entries on a video, and in these videos he was sitting on their furniture talking to this camera completely in the nude, which is disgusting. He also had all of these knives and surgical tools set up as if he was getting prepared to perform these surgeries on the family members. And he talked about how he wanted to make the family into, and I quote, "the perfect family" by doing these surgeries and whatnot. It was unclear to James and Brittany how long this man had been living in their home. However, after thinking about it, they said that there were strange things that would happen in the home that couldn't be explained, like doors being left open or locked when nobody was in the room, as well as webcams turning on in the middle of the night, and just little things like that now they realized was from this man who was living in their home. Ezekiel was arrested, but he was just charged with burglary and was released shortly after. I can't even imagine, like, that to me is the most terrifying part of this entire case, that he was just released back into the public. I can't even imagine the terror and horror that the family must have been living through, knowing that this person was just back in society. It would be one thing if he was just, you know, like a homeless man looking for shelter. That would still be terrifying, but I could kind of sympathize with that. But the fact that he had all of these gruesome, absolutely disgusting, horrible plans of what he was going to do with the family, you would think that he would have served for more than just burglary, because clearly this is a very, very unstable person who needed mental help. After being released, Ezekiel was then arrested shortly after for vandalizing a Buddhist temple, and while in prison serving for that crime, he murdered his 62-year-old cellmate Vance J. Grace. This was in 2020. He was charged with the murder in the fall of 2020 and pleaded not guilty, but was found unfit to be processed, and since has been at the Hawaii State Hospital. As you can imagine, this family is still absolutely traumatized by the events that took place in their home and have since moved away from that house and actually moved completely away from Hawaii altogether. This next case that we are going to be discussing is one of the more popular phrogging cases. I heard this one before I even started to get really interested in this phrogging thing. But this one isn't as detailed. However, it is still absolutely terrifying. I can't even imagine how violating it would feel to have somebody living in your personal space without your knowledge. And it is always somebody like they don't know, which is... In Japan in 2008, a man started to notice that food was going missing from his home that he was not eating. He lived alone and there was no logical explanation for this whatsoever. So he decided to set up cameras in his kitchen. These were motion censored cameras that were set up in this man's kitchen. He set them up and then the next day he went to work. However, while he was at work the next day, he got a notification that the motion censored cameras were on and that somebody was in his kitchen. This man thought that a burglar had broken into his house, so he called police who arrived at the home, but they were really confused because when they got there, they found that all of the windows and doors and any entrance to the home were all still securely closed and locked. They went inside and began to search the home, and that is when they found a woman curled up on a shelf in one of the man's closets. And it had turned out that this woman had been living in this man's home for just over a year. This woman was a homeless woman, and she had come into this man's home one day when the door was just unlocked. She was living on this shelf in this man's closet because it was the easiest place for her to hide, and she had even moved a mattress into this closet, and then she would come out when the man wasn't home and steal his food and even take showers. The 58-year-old woman obviously was arrested, and she was charged with trespassing. This next case takes place in Columbus, Ohio, and involves a bunch of Ohio State University students. They were all renting rooms in a house that was located at 13th Avenue in Columbus, Ohio, and all of the people who were moving into this home to attend school at Ohio State moved in on August 5th. Immediately after moving into this home, the tenants of the home started to notice that a lot of strange things were happening. Specifically, the power kept going out. And in order to turn the power back on, one of the students who were renting one of the rooms in the home would have to go down to the basement to flick on and off the breaker. It's important to know that this house was kind of like a split rental. So there were 5 people renting on one side of the home and 5 people renting on the other side of the home. And the 2 groups didn't know each other. One side was boys and one side was, I think, all girls. I'm not sure if it was all girls or majority girls on that side, but I know that it was majority girls living on that side and the other side was all boys. And they had no idea, they never met each other, they didn't know who was living on the opposite side of the home because it was completely split living. But they shared this room in the basement, and they all were ultimately living in the same house. So one day, Brent, one of the boys who was living on the boy side of the home, went down to the basement to flick the breaker, and there was a room located in the basement, but this door to this room was always locked, and you could always hear strange noises coming out of that room. While Brent was in the basement, he met this other person down there, and the person just seemed normal. They were just having a normal conversation, and this person introduced himself as Jeremy, and Brent just assumed that he was either visiting or lived on the opposite side of the home where they didn't know the other people who were renting on that side. As the weeks progressed, all the same strange stuff that was happening when the tenants first moved into the home continued to happen, but they started to get worse. Doors would always be left open, lights would always be on when they were supposed to be off. There were just a lot of strange things going on, and there always seemed to be a lot of noise coming from the basement. So much to the point that the people who were living in this house were absolutely certain that they had a ghost, and they would explain these strange happenings away to their guests by saying, "It's just the ghost again." All 10 of the tenants living in this house assumed that the locked room in the basement was just like a utility closet or something like that, until one day maintenance workers came to the home to do some work, and they ended up knocking down the door in the basement. That is when they found that these tenants had an 11th roommate. Inside this room, there was framed pictures, there was a bed, there was food, there were textbooks. All of the textbooks said in them the name Jeremy Alderman, sorry about that. Meaning that this Jeremy fellow that the Brent person met in the basement was living in that room. Now, this person wasn't renting that room, he was just living there. As you can imagine, the locks to the house were changed immediately that same day, and the tenants who were living in the home put up posters asking Jeremy to call them, and oddly enough, he did. They had found out that Jeremy's cousin had been living in the home the year prior, and that is how he got access to the house. They allowed him to come and pick up his belongings, and they all said that he seemed like a nice, normal guy. And residents of this home blame the rental office, as this was a university house that held up to, again, 10 people, and the locks to the home had never ever been changed, meaning that hundreds of people out there could have had the keys to these people's house that they were living in. That is a terrifying, terrifying thought. Now, I'm going to assume that Jeremy faced some kind of legal action. However, I couldn't find any details about that absolutely anywhere. Luckily, in this case specifically, the outcome wasn't that bad. And I'm sure that to the residents who have kind of like brushed this off, it's kind of a funny story, but I'm sure the violation and the absolute discomfort that you must feel knowing that this person has been living in your house, going through your belongings, you know, eating your food, I can't even imagine the trauma that would come along with any of these situations. But guys, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.